The rain poured like never before on the outskirts of Outpost City. The human colony sat far away from the central hub, where the wealthy and powerful lived. Down here, the streets were quiet, broken, and mostly forgotten. Wind howled through empty alleys, carrying the smell of rust, oil, and damp soil. Lightning flashed across the sky, lighting up the small metal homes scattered around the hills. Inside one of those homes, a man named John was fixing an old generator. He was a mechanic, simple, quiet, and alone. He lived by himself, working long hours repairing ships and machines for travelers who could barely pay him. He liked peace. He liked silence. But that night, silence came with a strange sound. A knock on the door. It wasn't a normal knock. It was fast, shaky, and full of fear. John looked up from his work. No one came to his house at night, especially not during a storm. The knocking came again, louder this time. All right, he muttered and went to open the door. When the door swung open, a flash of lightning lit the figure standing outside, a woman drenched from head to toe. But she wasn't human. Her skin was a pale blue that shimmered under the light, and her silver eyes looked wild with terror. She was shaking, her hands pressed together as if begging. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Pretend I'm your wife. I just need shelter, please." John froze. He thought he must have misheard her. "My what?" He said. "Your wife," she repeated. "If they find me, they'll kill me. Please, I'm begging you." Before he could reply, he noticed something behind her. Two dark shapes moving in the rain. They looked like soldiers wearing black armor that reflected faint red lights. They were searching, scanning every house with strange handheld devices. John's heart raced. Whoever she was being hunted. "Get inside," he said quickly and pulled her in. He shut the door and turned off the lights. The woman collapsed on the floor, coughing. Her clothes were torn, her feet bare, and she was bleeding from a cut on her arm. "Who's after you?" he whispered. She shook her head. "Don't ask. Just thank you for helping me. Please, I'll leave when they're gone." John peeked through the small metal blinds. The two soldiers walked slowly past his home. They stopped for a moment, scanning the air. John's heart pounded. The woman held her breath, her glowing eyes locked on the floor. For a moment it felt like time had stopped. Then finally the soldiers moved on. Their voices faded into the storm. John let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He turned back to the woman. "You're safe for now," he said. "Sit near the heater before you freeze to death." She hesitated but obeyed. As she sat down, steam rose from her wet clothes. She looked around the small, messy room. Tools on every table, half-built machines, and old photos on the wall. "You live here alone?" she asked softly. "Yeah," John replied. "No one else wants to live this far from the main city. Too quiet, too dangerous." She nodded slowly, warming her hands by the heater. "I'm sorry to trouble you, human." "My name is Lyra." "John," he replied. "And don't call me human like that. It sounds strange." She gave a weak smile. "I've never met one before." "Not close like this," John raised an eyebrow. "Lucky you," he said with a small laugh. But Lyra didn't laugh. Her eyes were sad. "My people don't like yours," she said. "They say humans are dangerous," he shrugged. "Maybe they're right." She looked at him again, studying his face as if trying to understand why he'd helped her. "You didn't even ask who I am." "Why?" John leaned back, sighing. "Because I can see fear. Whatever happened to you, you didn't deserve to die out there." Silence filled the room again, broken only by the sound of rain hitting the roof. Lyra looked at the floor, whispering to herself in her own language, the words soft and full of pain. Outside, a flash of light cut through the darkness again. This time it wasn't lightning, it was a ship, scanning the ground from above. The search wasn't over. Lyra stood up in panic. "They're still looking." John grabbed a small blaster from the table. "Then you better tell me the truth," he said. "Who are you and why are they hunting you?" Lyra looked at him with tears in her glowing eyes. "Because I refused to obey them. Because I helped humans once before." And with that the thunder roared again, shaking the walls, marking the start of a night that would change both their lives forever. The storm had calmed by morning, but the world outside still looked gray and broken. Water dripped from the metal rooftops, forming small puddles in the dusty streets. Inside John's small home, the air was warm from the old heater, but the feeling in the room was tense. The alien woman, Lyra, sat quietly by the window, wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes followed every movement John made. John poured a cup of coffee and handed her one. She looked at it strangely, unsure what to do. "It's not poison," he said with a small smile. "It'll warm you up." Lyra took a sip, flinched at the bitter taste, then nodded politely. "It's strong," John chuckled. "Welcome to human coffee." But even as they exchanged a few quiet words, something about her made him uneasy. Her hands shook every few minutes, and her gaze kept darting toward the door as if she expected someone to break in. The moment she heard a sound outside, she tensed like a frightened animal. Finally, John spoke. "All right, tell me. What's really going on? Last night you said they'd kill you. Who are they?" Lyra took a deep breath, her voice soft but heavy. "They're my people, the Guild Enforcers. I used to work for them as a translator. My job was to help with trade deals between species, including humans. But when I saw what they were doing behind the trade contracts, I refused to continue." "What were they doing?" John asked. She hesitated. "Slavery, experiments. They used small colonies, mostly human ones, for their gain. I tried to expose them. They caught me. I escaped." John frowned. "So they're hunting you to silence you." Lyra nodded, her eyes wet with fear. "They can't let me speak. They already erased my records. To them, I'm dead." John rubbed the back of his neck, thinking. "And you came here to the outskirts to hide?" "I had nowhere else to go," she said softly. "I thought maybe humans would help me. But when I knocked on the first few doors, they screamed. One even threw a rock at me." She looked down, clutching the blanket tighter. "When I saw your house, I thought maybe, if I said I was your wife, they'd believe it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to lie." John looked at her for a long moment. "You were desperate," he said finally. "Can't blame you for trying." Lyra lifted her gaze slowly, surprised by his calmness. "You're not afraid of me?" He smirked. "I've seen worse. Once a repair droid tried to stab me with its own screwdriver. Compared to that, you seem peaceful." For the first time, she smiled faintly. It was small but real. "You humans are strange," she said quietly. "You make jokes even when danger is close," John shrugged. "It keeps us alive." They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the colony streets began to stir with noise. Merchants shouting, vehicles passing, guards patrolling. The city was alive again, pretending nothing happened during the night. But both of them knew the enforcers were still searching. Lyra stood and walked to the small window, peeking out. Her reflection looked tired, her once bright skin dimmed with exhaustion. "They won't stop," she whispered. "If they find me here, they'll destroy everything. Even you," John crossed his arms. "Then we'll make sure they don't." Lyra turned to him sharply. "You don't understand. They have scanners, trackers, drones, machines that can smell energy traces. They'll come again." He nodded calmly. "Then we'll hide you better." She looked confused. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." John looked at her, serious now. "Because I don't leave people to die. Not after last night." For a moment she couldn't speak. Her throat tightened. "In my world," she said softly, "help always has a price." He smiled faintly. "Then consider this one free." Before she could respond, a deep rumbling sound echoed from outside. The ground trembled lightly. Lyra ran to the window and gasped. A massive patrol ship was flying low, its scanners glowing red. "They're here," she whispered. John's face hardened. "All right, get down." He quickly turned off all lights and motion sensors. The room went dim, lit only by faint sunlight through the blinds. The patrol ship hovered nearby, sending red beams across the homes. A mechanical voice shouted orders in an alien tongue. Lyra crouched behind the workbench, her hands over her mouth. John crouched beside her. The beam swept across the room, then stopped at the door. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure the scanners could hear it. The sound of footsteps grew closer. The door rattled as someone scanned the lock. John grabbed her wrist. "Go," he whispered. "There's a crawl space under the floor." She hesitated, eyes wide with fear. "What about you?" "I'll handle them." She slipped into the narrow gap below the floor as the door burst open. 3 armored enforcers entered, weapons drawn, red eyes scanning the room. "Human," one said sharply. "We are looking for a fugitive, female, blue skin, dangerous." John stood up slowly, hands raised. "Haven't seen anyone like that," he said evenly. They scanned the walls, the floor, the windows. The beam passed inches over the spot where Lyra hid. One soldier stepped closer, but John coughed loudly to distract him. "If you're going to keep barging into homes," he said, "at least wipe your boots." "You're ruining my floor." The alien sneered but moved back. After a tense minute, they left. When the door closed again, John lifted the floor panel. Lyra crawled out, shaking and pale. "You risked everything," she said in disbelief. John smiled tiredly. "I told you I don't leave people to die." Outside, thunder rumbled again, though the storm had long passed. It wasn't weather. It was the sound of engines. The hunt had only just begun. The morning sun tried to break through the thick clouds, but the light that reached John's small home was weak and cold. He stood by the broken window, watching the patrol ship move away into the distance. The sound of its engines faded, leaving behind only silence. Inside, Lyra sat on the floor, her back against the wall. Her face was pale, her hands still trembling from fear. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The air between them was heavy, filled with unspoken worry. Then finally, John broke the silence. "You can't stay in that crawl space forever," he said softly. "They'll come back." Lyra lifted her eyes, her voice almost a whisper. "I know, they always come back. Once they mark someone as a traitor, they never stop." John rubbed his chin, thinking. "Then we need a better plan. I can hide you here, but not out in the open. There's a storage room behind the workshop. No scanners can reach it. I built the walls with old engine plating. That might buy us time." She looked at him, surprised. "You'd really do that?" "For me?" He shrugged. "You're already here. I'm not the type to throw someone out in the rain." Lyra's silver eyes softened for a moment. She gave a small nod. "Then I'll try not to be a burden." They moved quietly into the back of the house. John opened a narrow door hidden behind a pile of spare parts. The room was small, dark, and full of metal crates. He cleared a corner, placed a blanket on the floor, and gave her one of his old jackets. "It's not much," he said, "but it's warm." Lyra touched the fabric gently, as if she'd never held anything so soft before. "It's perfect," she whispered. John turned away, pretending to fix some tools, but he felt her eyes on him. She seemed so fragile, yet there was something powerful in her, like someone who had seen too much, lost too much, and still refused to give up. Hours passed. John worked in the front room, fixing a broken hover engine, while Lyra quietly organized his tools. He hadn't asked her to help, but she did it anyway. Her movements were careful and precise, as if she wanted to repay him somehow. When she spoke again, her voice was gentle. "You humans, you're not what they said." John looked up. "What did they say?" "That humans are violent, selfish, always hungry for power." "But you—" She paused, her gaze thoughtful. "You risked your life for me, a stranger. Why?" John put down his wrench. "Maybe because I've been on the other side before." Lyra tilted her head, curious. "The other side?" He sighed. "A long time ago during the war, I was stranded on a mining world. No weapons, no backup. The enemy found me, but instead of killing me, one of them hid me in her home. She said mercy was stronger than fear." Lyra looked at him quietly. "What happened to her?" He smiled sadly. "She didn't make it out." The room fell silent again. Lyra didn't ask more. She just stood there, her eyes full of something new, respect, maybe even sorrow. Later that night, the wind howled again, shaking the roof. John was checking the generator when he heard footsteps behind him. Lyra stood there holding a tray with a small plate of food. It wasn't much, some bread and soup, but it made him smile. "You made this?" he asked. "I tried," she said shyly. "I watched you cook earlier. It's not perfect, but—" He took a bite. It was terrible, but he didn't say that. Instead, he said, "It's good." She smiled, her face glowing faintly under the soft light. For the first time, her laughter filled the room, soft, musical, and full of warmth. "You're lying," she said. John laughed too. Maybe a little. For a few moments, the fear disappeared. There were no soldiers, no drones, no threats, just two people from different worlds sharing a small piece of peace. But that peace didn't last long. A loud bang shook the door. Both froze. Lyra's eyes widened in terror. John motioned for her to stay quiet. The knock came again, heavier this time. "Maintenance check," a voice shouted from outside. "All homes must be scanned for safety compliance." John's mind raced. It wasn't random. They were checking houses again. He whispered, "Back room now." Lyra ran to the hidden chamber, closing the door behind her. John opened the main door slightly. Two colony officers stood outside with a scanner. "Morning," John said casually. "Didn't know there was a check today." "Routine," one officer replied, scanning the interior. The red beam moved across the room. John kept his expression calm even though his heart pounded. The scanner beeped softly. One of the officers frowned. Strange. Energy trace detected. John forced a laugh. Probably the old generator. It leaks more power than it gives. The officer scanned again, then shrugged. You should get that fixed before it blows. Yeah, I'll get right on it. They left without further questions. When John closed the door, he let out a long breath. He went to the back room and opened it. Lyra stood there shaking. They almost found me, she whispered. He nodded. Yeah, but they didn't. Lyra stared at him for a moment, then said softly, You're not just saving me. You're fighting for me. John looked at her, then smiled faintly. Maybe both. Outside, the rain began again, tapping gently on the metal roof, like a reminder that danger was still near. But hope was closer. The next morning, the storm clouds were gone, and a pale blue sunrise spread across the sky. The air smelled of wet metal and soil after the rain. John stepped outside to check the solar panels on his roof. He felt the soft wind on his face, carrying the faint scent of the alien flowers that grew beyond the colony walls. It was peaceful for once, too peaceful. He knew that silence never lasted long in places like this. When he came back inside, Lyra was sitting at the workbench, holding a small metal piece between her fingers. She was fixing one of his broken scanners, using tools that didn't even belong to humans. Her hands moved fast, careful, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. John watched her quietly for a moment. You're pretty good at that, he said. Lyra looked up and smiled faintly. In the guild, I wasn't allowed to touch machines, only to translate. But I watched the engineers. I learned by observing. He raised an eyebrow. You learned just by watching? She nodded. My kind remember what we see. Every sound, every movement, it stays. John whistled softly. That's a gift. And a curse, I guess. Lyra's smile faded a little. Yes, I remember everything I wish I could forget. The silence that followed was heavy but not cold. John walked over, took the repaired scanner, and tested it. The display flickered, then came alive. Perfect, he said. You've just saved me 3 hours of work. She looked proud, though her eyes were still tired. I'm glad I could help. The day passed quietly. John worked on machines, and Lyra helped him sort parts, clean circuits, and test power cells. The more time they spent together, the less strange it felt. She stopped hiding every time there was a noise outside. She began to laugh a little more. Sometimes she asked small questions about human life, simple ones that made John smile. Why do humans eat 3 times a day? She asked once with genuine curiosity. He laughed. Because if we didn't, we'd kill each other by lunchtime. That made her laugh too, a soft, musical sound that filled the workshop like sunlight. But even in that warmth, a shadow still followed them. The memory of the patrol, the sound of heavy boots, the red scanning lights, they haunted her. Every time John left the house to buy supplies, she'd wait by the window until he returned. Every time she heard engines in the distance, she froze. That evening, while John was cleaning his tools, Lyra spoke again, her voice quieter this time. John, why are humans so kind to strangers? He looked up, surprised by the question. Not all of us are, he said honestly. But some of us remember what it's like to need help and not get it. She tilted her head. You talk as if you've been there. He sighed and sat down. When I was younger, my unit was attacked. We lost everything. I wandered for days before someone, a stranger, gave me food and a place to sleep. That small kindness, it changed me. Lyra listened closely. In my world, she said, kindness is seen as weakness. If you help someone, others think you're soft. Unfit for survival, John shook his head. Then your world's broken. She looked at him, her eyes glimmering under the soft light. Maybe that's why I left it behind. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. There was no fear now, only understanding. 2 souls from different worlds, each scarred, each searching for something they'd lost long ago. Later that night, when they sat by the small heater, John asked, When you said you pretended to be my wife, what did you mean exactly? Lyra smiled shyly. In my culture, bonded pairs are protected by law. Even the enforcers won't harm a registered mate. I thought, if they saw me with you, they might hesitate. John leaned back, smiling a little. So I saved your life by being your fake husband? Her cheeks turned slightly purple, her species version of blushing. It seems so, he laughed. Well, that's one strange way to start a friendship. Lyra looked at him, her expression soft. Friendship, she whispered, as if testing the word. I like that word. Just then, a loud noise came from outside, a mechanical screech that made both of them jump. John rushed to the window and saw a drone hovering above the rooftops. Lyra's face turned pale. "They're scanning again," she said. John quickly pulled her back from the window. "Stay low." The drone passed slowly, its red beam sweeping across the colony. It paused near his house, then continued on. When it was gone, Lyra exhaled shakily. John looked at her. "We can't stay like this forever," she nodded. "If they find me, they'll take you too." "Then we make sure they don't find either of us," he said firmly. Lyra looked into his eyes and whispered, "You don't owe me anything, John. You could turn me in and be safe." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I don't owe you, but maybe I want to do the right thing anyway." Her eyes glistened and she looked away, hiding a tear. "You humans, you make things complicated." He chuckled softly. "That's how we survive." As night settled in, the two of them sat quietly, watching the small heater glow. For the first time in a long time, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt since her world fell apart: safety. And for John, the lonely mechanic who had spent years in silence, there was finally warmth in his home again. Outside, the wind whispered through the metal streets, carrying a promise neither of them could hear yet, a promise that their bond would soon be tested in ways neither could imagine. The next 2 days passed in uneasy peace. John and Lyra fell into a quiet rhythm, working, eating, sleeping, pretending that the world outside their door didn't exist. But both of them knew it couldn't last. The colony was changing. More soldiers appeared on the streets. More patrol ships hummed through the skies, and everyone seemed to be watching everyone else. Fear had crept into the air. That morning, John was repairing a broken drone when Lyra suddenly froze by the window. Her silver eyes widened. "They're here again," she whispered. John rushed over. Down the dirt street, a line of armored enforcers was moving from house to house. This time they weren't just searching. They were scanning with heavy equipment, dragging strange humming machines behind them. Lyra's hands trembled. "Those are molecular scanners," she said in panic. "They can detect alien DNA through walls," John cursed under his breath. "Then we've got minutes." He turned and grabbed a small metallic case from under his table. Inside were several syringes filled with a faintly glowing blue liquid. Lyra stared at them in confusion. "What is that?" "Nanotech serum," John said quickly. "Old military stuff. It can mask your biometrics for a few hours if it's mixed with human cells. It'll fool their scanners, maybe." Lyra shook her head. "That's dangerous." "It's not made for my kind," he met her eyes, steady and calm. "It's either this, or we both die." For a moment the room was silent except for the hum of the scanners drawing closer. Lyra swallowed hard and nodded. "Do it." John took a deep breath, then injected a small dose into her arm. The liquid pulsed under her skin, spreading faint blue veins across her forearm before fading away. She gasped in pain but didn't scream. Her skin tone shifted slightly, taking on a faint human warmth. John watched the color change. "It's working," he whispered. Outside, the soldiers had reached the house next door. They were scanning slowly, carefully. The loud mechanical voice called out again. "Search every residence. The fugitive is near." John moved fast. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the main room. "Listen," he said. "When they come in, don't hide. Stay beside me. You're my wife. You live here. Act normal." Lyra blinked in shock. "Your wife?" He nodded. "You started this lie. Let's make it real." Her cheeks flushed a soft violet, but she didn't argue. "If this works, John." He cut her off. "It will." Moments later, the door shook under a heavy knock. John opened it slowly, keeping his expression calm. 3 enforcers stood outside, their armor glinting under the daylight. The leader stepped forward. "Human," he said coldly. "We are conducting scans for a fugitive female. Blue skin, silver eyes, dangerous, you will not interfere." John crossed his arms. "You've already searched this sector last week." The alien ignored him and pushed past, holding a scanner. The red beam swept over the walls, the floor, the ceiling, then turned toward Lyra. She stood by the table, wearing one of John's old shirts. Her skin, now slightly tinted human pink from the serum, looked natural under the dim light. She smiled weakly and said in a calm voice, "Is something wrong, officers?" The leader frowned and pointed the scanner directly at her. The screen blinked twice, then turned green. "Human signature confirmed," it said in a robotic tone. John forced a small laugh. "Told you. That's my wife, Lyra. We've been living here for months." The enforcer looked from John to Lyra, then back again. You humans bond strangely, he muttered. Keep your identification visible. If we discover false data, you will be executed. When the soldiers finally left, the air seemed to rush back into the room. Lyra collapsed into the chair, breathing hard. John dropped the scanner from his hand and leaned against the wall, exhausted. Lyra stared at him, her voice shaking. You risked everything. John shrugged lightly, still trying to calm his heartbeat. I told you we were in this together. She reached for his hand, her skin still warm from the serum. You don't understand. If they discover what you did using human tech on me, they'll call it treason. He looked into her eyes and said softly, Then I guess I'm a traitor. For a long moment, neither spoke. The tension between them changed, no longer fear, but something deeper, quieter. She still held his hand, not pulling away. Outside, the hum of engines echoed again, but farther this time. The patrol was moving on. For now they were safe. Lyra broke the silence. John, back on my world, no one would ever do what you did. Not even for family, he smiled faintly. Then maybe your world needs a few more humans. She laughed softly, wiping the tears from her eyes. You humans are impossible. You help even when it makes no sense. John chuckled. That's our special flaw. That night, as the two of them sat beside the dim heater, John noticed how quiet it had become. The storm had passed, the patrols had moved on, and for the first time in days the colony seemed peaceful. But deep down he knew it wouldn't last because now the lie had become too perfect, too convincing. Somewhere out there the enforcers would review their scans again. They would notice an anomaly, a faint trace of alien energy hidden behind human DNA. And when they did, they would come back, but for now John let himself rest. Lyra leaned against his shoulder, her voice soft as a whisper. Thank you, my human husband. He smiled in the dark. Don't say that too loud. Someone might believe you. She smiled too, eyes closing. That's the point. Outside, under the stars, a distant ship received a signal. The hunt wasn't over. It was only changing shape. The night was quiet. Too quiet for a colony used to the constant hum of engines and machinery. The air felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. Inside John's small home, the dim heater flickered softly, casting long shadows across the walls. Lyra sat near it, staring at her trembling hands. Her eyes, normally soft silver, looked darker now, clouded by something she had been hiding all along. John sat across from her, polishing a small energy pistol. He noticed her silence and frowned. You've been quiet since the patrol left, he said gently. Something's bothering you. She didn't look up. You shouldn't have saved me, John. He set the pistol down. Too late to say that now. Her lips tightened. You don't understand. You think they're hunting me because I ran away, but it's more than that. John leaned forward. Then make me understand. For a moment, Lyra said nothing. The heater hummed between them. Then slowly she began to speak, her voice trembling but strong. I wasn't just a translator for the Guild. I worked in a facility called the Genesis Complex. We studied human DNA. John's jaw clenched. Studied? Or experimented on? She met his gaze, tears gathering in her eyes. Experimented. They wanted to know how humans heal so fast, how your bodies adapt to any environment, any pain. They said it was for medical progress. But it wasn't, John's voice dropped. How many did they take? Lyra shook her head. Dozens, maybe hundreds. I didn't know the truth at first. They told us the humans were volunteers, criminals even. But then I saw one, a child. No older than 10, crying for her mother. Her voice broke. That was the day I helped them escape. I hacked the security systems and opened the gates. Most made it out. Some didn't. John sat back, staring at her in shock. You freed human captives? Lyra nodded. And when the Guild found out, they marked me as a traitor. They destroyed every record of my existence. To them, I'm already dead. Silence filled the room. The storm outside had returned, thunder rumbling like distant drums. John stood slowly and walked to the window. He stared at the flickering lights of the colony, his heart pounding with a mix of anger and admiration. You risked everything for them, he said quietly. For us. Lyra looked down. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I thought I could hide forever, but when I saw your soldiers at the border world, I realized something. What? She met his eyes, her voice trembling. Humans fight for each other. My people don't. I wanted to understand why. John turned away, his chest tight. You didn't need to die for that answer. Before she could respond, a sudden shriek of engines tore through the night. John ran to the door and opened it slightly. A red light swept across the street. Drones, dozens of them, scanning the houses one by one. Lyra gasped. They found me. John slammed the door shut. No time to think, grab your things. He tossed her a small bag and pulled on his jacket. The sound of boots echoed outside, heavy and fast. Shadows moved past the window. Enforcers. They're sealing the street, Lyra said in panic. John pressed a button on the wall, and a hidden panel opened behind the workbench. Inside was a narrow tunnel leading underground. Maintenance shaft, he said. It leads to the old freight docks. Lyra hesitated. John, if you go with me, you'll never be able to come back, he smirked. Who said I ever wanted to stay? They slipped into the tunnel just as the door burst open behind them. Red lights filled the room and alien voices shouted orders. John and Lyra crawled through the dark passage, their breaths echoing in the silence. After what felt like hours, they emerged into the open air near the edge of the colony. The sky above was alive with fire, patrol ships sweeping low, searchlights slicing through the clouds. John pointed toward the hills. There's an old hoverbike buried near the outpost ruins. If we reach it, we can make it to the mountains. Lyra nodded, gripping his hand. Lead the way. They ran through the shadows, ducking behind broken walls and old machinery. The ground shook as plasma blasts tore through the dirt behind them. The night was alive with chaos, sirens, thunder, and the distant roar of engines. At last, they reached the ruins of an old garage. John dug through the debris until he uncovered a rusted hoverbike. Come on, girl, he muttered, slamming his fist on the engine panel. The bike roared to life with a cough of blue light. Lyra climbed behind him, wrapping her arms tightly around his waist. If we survive this, she whispered, you'll regret helping me. John smiled grimly. I already regret everything. Let's go. The bike shot forward into the storm, wind whipping through their hair. Behind them, explosions lit up the sky as enforcer ships chased them. John swerved between burning trees and jagged rocks, dodging beams of red energy. Hold on, he shouted. A blast hit the ground beside them, throwing dirt and light into the air. The bike spun, almost flipping, but John regained control just in time. The mountains loomed ahead, dark and tall like sleeping giants. They crossed into the misty valley beyond the colony borders, where the scanners couldn't reach. When they finally stopped, both were gasping for breath. Lyra looked at him, her face streaked with dust and tears. You could have left me back there, he smiled weakly. I don't leave people behind. It's a human thing. She laughed softly through her exhaustion. Then maybe humanity was worth saving after all. The sun began to rise behind the mountains, painting the sky with gold and red. For the first time, Lyra felt free. And for the first time, John realized he wasn't just saving her. He was part of something much bigger. The war between their worlds wasn't over. But together, they had just lit the first spark of change. The mountains stretched endlessly, their peaks hidden by silver mist and glowing streaks of dawn. The storm had passed, but its echo still lingered in the sky. Flashes of distant lightning, faint hums of patrol engines far behind. John guided the old hoverbike up a steep path until the machine finally sputtered and died. They had reached the end of the road. Below them lay the valley, then quiet, untouched, and bathed in the soft light of morning. The air smelled of fresh rain and alien flowers. For the first time in days, there was no sound of pursuit, no red light scanning the dark. Just silence. John exhaled, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. We're clear, he said quietly. Lyra stepped off the bike, her legs shaking from exhaustion. Her hair was tangled, her clothes torn, but her eyes were alive. Alive in a way they hadn't been since he first found her in the rain. She turned slowly, taking in the sight of the valley. It's beautiful, she whispered. I never thought I'd see peace again. John looked at her, smiling faintly. Welcome to freedom, then. But even as he said it, a strange sadness crept into his chest. Freedom came with a price. He knew they couldn't go back. Not to the colony, not to the lives they'd left behind. From now on, they were fugitives. They walked down into the valley, their boots sinking softly into the wet soil. In the center stood the ruins of an ancient human outpost. Broken towers, half-buried metal walls, and shattered satellite dishes covered in moss. It was quiet, forgotten, yet somehow alive. Lyra touched one of the walls gently. How old is this place? John crouched beside a rusted console, brushing away layers of dust. Older than both of us. These stations were built during the first colonization age. They went dark after the war. Lyra looked around with curiosity. You humans built so much, and yet you left it all behind? He smiled faintly. We always move forward, even when we're not ready to. While John searched through the wreckage, Lyra wandered through a narrow corridor, her fingers tracing strange symbols carved into the walls. Old human code mixed with alien marks. Someone was here before, she said softly. Someone like me. John joined her, holding a small device glowing weakly in his hand. I think I found something. An emergency beacon. The old kind, long-range, analog. It still works, her eyes widened. A beacon? That could reach orbit. He nodded. Maybe farther. If I reroute the power cells, it could send a distress signal to any human ship still listening. Lyra hesitated. But if they come, they'll find me too. They'll see what I am. John met her gaze. Then they'll see the truth. That an alien risked her life to save humans. Maybe it's time both our species learned what mercy looks like. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Do it. Together they worked side by side. John rewired the beacon's circuits while Lyra used her knowledge of guild frequencies to amplify the signal. Sparks flew, metal hissed, and the air filled with the soft hum of awakening machinery. As the system came alive, the old tower lights began to flicker, glowing faint blue against the rising sun. Lyra shielded her eyes from the brightness, her heart pounding. Signal ready, John said. Once I press this, there's no turning back. Lyra stepped closer. Then press it, he smiled. You sure? She placed her hand over his. We've run long enough. Together they pushed the button. The beacon roared to life, sending a brilliant pulse of light shooting into the morning sky. It streaked upward like a star being born, piercing the clouds, carrying a message through the void. Human distress. Survivors found. Coordinates locked. They stood there in silence, watching the beam fade into the heavens. Lyra's voice trembled. They'll come, won't they? John nodded. Oh, they'll come. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, painting the valley gold. Lyra rested against the wall, her head on John's shoulder. You could have left me, she whispered. You could have walked away and no one would have blamed you. John smiled softly. Maybe. But then I wouldn't have met the bravest person I've ever known. Her eyes shimmered. You call me brave? You stood against your whole world, he said. That's more than bravery. That's hope. Before Lyra could respond, a low rumble echoed from above. She looked up and gasped. The sky was alive again, but this time not with the cold red lights of the enforcers. This light was silver and blue, the unmistakable glow of human fleet engines breaking through the clouds. Ships, dozens, maybe hundreds, descended in perfect formation. Their insignias glinted in the sunlight, the symbol of the Terran Alliance. The fleet had heard the call. Lyra covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. They came, John grinned. Told you they'd come. As the largest ship hovered above them, its lights bathing the ruins in warm brilliance, a human voice echoed from the sky, crackling through the speakers. Ground signal received. Unknown human signature detected. Preparing rescue. Lyra turned to him, smiling through her tears. What will they think when they see me? John squeezed her hand gently. They'll think they found someone worth saving. The ship's engines roared, sending wind and light across the valley. Lyra's hair lifted in the breeze as she looked at John, the man who had changed everything for her. You humans, she whispered. You never stop surprising me. He smiled, eyes fixed on the rising fleet. That's kind of our thing. And as the first dropship descended to land near them, the sunlight broke through the last of the clouds, painting the mountains in gold. The hunted alien and the lonely human stood side by side, no longer fugitives, no longer strangers, but symbols of something new. Hope. A new dawn had begun,